Have you ever gone through that devastating experience of understanding something fundamental about reality, something so profound and disturbing that it forever changed how you see the world, and then discovered there's no way to unknow what you now know? Perhaps it happened during a casual conversation when someone mentioned a historical fact that shattered a belief you'd carried since childhood. Or maybe it occurred while you were reading a book, watching a documentary, or even reflecting alone in a moment of silence. Suddenly, the pieces fell together in a way they could never be undone, and you found yourself facing a truth you would have preferred not to know. It's as if an invisible veil covering your eyes had been removed, revealing an aspect of human existence that was always there, but which you had successfully ignored until that precise moment. The sensation is simultaneously one of liberation and imprisonment. Liberation because you finally see clearly. Imprisonment because you can no longer return to the comfort of your previous ignorance. This is one of the most universally human experiences and, paradoxically, one of the loneliest. Millions of people go through this transformation every day, but each carries the weight of this revelation in almost complete isolation, as if they were the only one cursed with such clarity. What makes this experience even more anguishing is the gradual realization that most people around you continue living as if this truth doesn't exist. They follow their routines, maintain their convictions, participate in the same social rituals and superficial conversations, while you carry the knowledge of something that fundamentally alters the meaning of all of this. It's like watching a theater performance, knowing that all the actors have forgotten their acting. You see the strings that move the marionettes, but you can't simply stand up from the audience and reveal the trick to everyone because you know the revelation wouldn't be well received. In fact, you've discovered that trying to share these perceptions usually results in social isolation, misunderstanding, or even hostility. People have deep emotional investments in maintaining certain illusions, and those who dare to question them often become targets of unconscious resentment. Thus, you learn to navigate two worlds simultaneously. The world of shared appearances, where you need to function socially, and the world of deeper understanding, where your true experience of reality resides. Throughout human history, thinkers, philosophers, scientists, and artists have described this same existential condition with different words, but always capturing the essence of this particular pain. Plato spoke of the cave and the difficulty of returning to tell others about sunlight. Buddha described the suffering inherent in conscious existence. Nietzsche wrote about the burden of carrying truths that few are prepared to bear. Each of them, in their own way, touched on this fundamental wound. Once you see, you can no longer stop seeing. Once you understand the mechanisms behind the grand narratives that govern human life, you can no longer participate in them with the same previous innocence. This doesn't necessarily mean you become cynical or bitter, although these are real risks. It means you carry a double consciousness, awareness of what is apparent and awareness of what lies behind the apparent. You live simultaneously on the surface and in the depths, and this duplicity requires constant psychological energy that can be exhausting. It's like being an anthropologist of your own culture, observing from within and without at the same time, never completely immersed in immediate experience. Because you're always conscious of the larger patterns that govern it. In our current era, this condition has become even more complex and widespread. Modern technology has created powerful tools for revealing truths that previously remained hidden in the shadows of academic specialization or esoteric knowledge. The internet has democratized access to information that was historically available only to small circles of initiates. Anyone with sufficient curiosity can now investigate the origins of institutions that govern their life, question the historical narratives they learned in school, discover how the economic and political systems that shape their daily experience really function. They can explore different philosophical and religious traditions, compare cosmogonies, study neuroscience and psychology to understand the mechanisms of their own mind. This democratization of knowledge has profound and not entirely predictable consequences. On one hand, it empowers individuals and allows for more sophisticated understanding of reality. On the other hand, it creates a generation of people who carry the weight of insights that their social structures weren't designed to accommodate. The result is a peculiarly modern form of alienation. Not Marx's alienation of the worker, which was unconscious of its condition, but the conscious alienation of those who clearly see how mechanisms of control, manipulation, and collective illusion function, but must continue participating in them to survive. This conscious alienation manifests in various ways in daily life. You might be in a work meeting listening to discussions about productivity and goals, while part of your mind observes the power games in operation, the underlying psychological dynamics, the way certain words are used to create compliance without questioning. You might be watching the news and perceiving not just what's being reported, but how it's being reported, which perspectives are being privileged, what questions aren't being asked, how certain narratives are constructed to produce specific emotional reactions. You might be in an apparently innocent social conversation and notice patterns of conformity, subtle signals of hierarchy, the way people perform idealized versions of themselves based on cultural expectations they themselves haven't fully questioned. This constant perception of meta patterns creates a sense of distance that can be profoundly lonely. You're present, but also observing your own presence. You're participating, but also analyzing your own participation. It's a form of self-consciousness that can be both illuminating and paralyzing. I need to pause for a moment to ask you directly. When was the last time you felt this kind of uncomfortable awakening? That moment when you understood something about the nature of reality that you would have preferred not to understand? Perhaps it was something about how human relationships really work, or about the constructed nature of values you considered absolute, or about the psychological mechanisms that govern your own decisions. I know we often keep these revelations to ourselves, perhaps out of fear of seeming pretentious or too pessimistic in a world that values superficial optimism. But your experience is valid and most likely shared by more people than you imagine. If this theme resonates with you, share in the comments. My moment of uncomfortable awakening happened when I understood that. Your honesty might be exactly what someone needs to read today to feel less alone in this journey of deeper understanding of human existence. The central paradox of this condition is that the knowledge that causes suffering also offers a unique form of liberation. While it's true that you can no longer return to previous ignorance, it's also true that deeper understanding of reality's mechanisms offers possibilities for more conscious and potentially wiser navigation. When you understand how emotional manipulation systems work, you become less susceptible to them. When you clearly see the unconscious dynamics that govern human behavior, you can make more deliberate choices about how to respond to them. When you recognize the constructed nature of many structures that seemed natural and inevitable, you can participate in their reconstruction in more intentional ways. The suffering comes from resistance to the new reality, from nostalgia for lost simplicity, from the sense of isolation that accompanies differentiated perception. But there's also a particular dignity in carrying difficult truths, a form of courage that develops only through willingness to face uncomfortable aspects of human existence. It's what some philosophical traditions call amor fati, not just accepting, but completely embracing reality as it is, including its most disturbing aspects. This radical acceptance isn't passive or resigned. On the contrary, it liberates psychological energy that was previously spent resisting reality, allowing more creative and effective engagement with possibilities for transformation. When you stop fighting against the fact that certain illusions are illusions, you can begin to work consciously with them or create more satisfying alternatives. When you accept that alienation is part of the modern human condition, you can seek authentic forms of connection that honor both your lucidity and your need for belonging. When you recognize that existential suffering is inseparable from elevated consciousness, you can develop practices and perspectives that make this suffering more bearable and perhaps even transform it into a source of wisdom and compassion. The Buddhist tradition has an interesting concept for this. Bodhisattva, the being who awakens to truth about the nature of reality, but chooses to remain in the world of suffering to help others on their journey of understanding. It's a powerful metaphor for the possibility of transforming the pain of awakening into a force of compassionate service. Contemporary technology is creating conditions for this transformation to happen on an unprecedented scale. For the first time in human history, large segments of the population have instant access to virtually any information, can connect with people who share similar concerns regardless of geographical boundaries, and have tools to create and disseminate their own narratives about reality. This is leading to a kind of collective awakening, though fragmented and disorganized. Millions of people are simultaneously questioning official narratives, exploring alternative philosophies, experimenting with new forms of social and economic organization, creating art and literature that expresses this double consciousness we're discussing. It's an extraordinary historical moment, though also profoundly destabilizing. Traditional institutions that historically mediated access to knowledge and interpretation of reality are losing their monopoly. This creates enormous opportunities for greater intellectual and creative autonomy, but also significant risks of social fragmentation, epistemological confusion, and manipulation by new types of authorities who know how to exploit the psychological vulnerability of people in transition. The challenge for those who carry this double consciousness is finding ways to live with integrity in a world that hasn't yet developed adequate structures to accommodate higher levels of collective consciousness. This requires a combination of practical wisdom, moral courage, and social creativity. Practical wisdom to distinguish between useful truth and truth that simply cause unnecessary suffering. Moral courage to remain true to what you've seen and understood, even when this means accepting certain types of loneliness or misunderstanding. And social creativity to find or create communities, practices, and forms of expression that honor both your lucidity and your fundamental humanity. This might mean seeking relationships with people who are on similar journeys of questioning and discovery. It might mean developing contemplative practices that help process the intensity of revelations you're having about the nature of reality. It might mean finding forms of artistic, intellectual, or activist expression that transform your understanding into constructive contributions to cultural evolution. Or it might simply mean learning to live with more compassion for yourself and others who haven't yet reached the point of awakening where you find yourself. One of the most important discoveries on this journey is that truth is not a destination, but a continuous process. What you see today as ultimate truth will probably reveal new layers of complexity and nuance as your capacity for perception continues developing. This can be both humbling and liberating. Humbling because you realize that your current understanding, no matter how profound it seems, is still limited and partial. Liberating because you free yourself from the pressure of having to defend a fixed worldview and can embrace continuous openness to new ways of seeing and understanding. This dynamic perspective on truth also alleviates some of the loneliness that accompanies initial awakening. You begin to see that it's not a matter of being right while others are wrong, but of being at different stages of a process that is inherently human. The continuous search for deeper understanding of reality and our place in it. This can cultivate a special form of compassion. Compassion for those who haven't yet seen what you've seen. Compassion for yourself when struggling with the implications of what you've seen. And compassion for the general human condition, which seems to involve inevitable cycles of illusion, awakening, suffering, and potential transformation. This compassion isn't condescending or superiority driven. It's based on recognition that awakening to difficult truths is often painful and that not everyone is at a moment in life when they can deal with certain types of revelation. There's timing to these things. There's wisdom in respecting where people are in their journeys, even when you can clearly see the limitations of their current perspectives. This doesn't mean you should always remain silent about what you've understood, but it means you can learn to share your insights in ways that honor others' dignity and autonomy, rather than trying to force revelations they may not be prepared to receive. It's a delicate art, being honest about your own experience of reality without imposing that experience as the only valid one, being available for those who demonstrate genuine curiosity about deeper questions without becoming an evangelist of your own enlightenment. maintaining your intellectual and spiritual integrity without completely isolating yourself from social structures that are still necessary for functional life. Perhaps the deepest understanding that emerges from this experience of uncomfortable awakening is that the human condition is fundamentally paradoxical, and that learning to live with paradox may be more valuable than trying to resolve. We are simultaneously animals and something beyond animals. We are products of historical and social forces we don't control, and at the same time, agents capable of conscious transformation. We are unique individuals and part of a larger collective fabric. We are beings who seek truth and meaning in a universe that may be fundamentally without inherent purpose. These contradictions aren't problems to be solved, but creative tensions to be embraced. When you stop fighting against the paradox of human existence and learn to dance with it, something interesting happens. The pain of awakening doesn't disappear completely, but transforms into a peculiar form of melancholic joy. The joy of seeing clearly, even when what you see is disturbing. The joy of being able to admire the complexity and beauty of human systems, even when you also see their limitations and distortions. The joy of consciously participating in the great experiment that is human civilization, even knowing that much of it is improvisation based on questionable assumptions. This melancholic joy can become a source of profound appreciation for human experience in all its contradictoriness. You can simultaneously admire the innocence of someone who still completely believes in narratives you recognize as social constructions, and the courage of that same person in living fully within those narratives. You can feel tenderness for the illusions people need to maintain to function emotionally, even while you yourself can no longer sustain them. You can participate in social rituals you consider arbitrary, but find beauty in how they create shared connection and meaning for those who participate with genuine faith. This posture is neither cynical nor sentimental. It's a mature form of love for humanity that includes both its limitations and its possibilities, both its blindness and its occasional capacity for true vision. It's what mystics from various traditions have called non-dual vision, the ability to see simultaneously the imperfection and perfection of existence, suffering and beauty, illusion and truth, without needing to choose sides or artificially reconcile opposites. We now arrive at a crucial point in this reflection. Understanding that carrying difficult truths is not a burden you must bear alone, but a responsibility that can be shared in creative and constructive ways. Human history is largely the history of people who saw something others couldn't see and found ways to translate that vision into contributions that elevated the general level of consciousness and possibility. Artists who expressed aspects of human experience that hadn't been articulated before. Scientists who revealed patterns in nature that transformed our understanding of ourselves. Philosophers who questioned fundamental assumptions about reality, morality, and meaning. Activists who pointed to injustices that were invisible to the majority. Each of these contributors had to navigate the tension between their particular vision and the limitations of their time's collective consciousness. Each found ways to translate potentially disturbing